For many children across DeKalb County, this was the first week of school. And in my household, this was one of the biggest weeks of our entire lives. See, after 4 long years of cobbling together childcare, straining both the boundaries of friendship and the goodwill of employers, hiring nannies and sitters, rushing home to drive the boys home from their half-day preschool in the middle of the day came when we finally had to push our twin boys towards that towering, impossibly institutional school building, where for the first time, they would be in separate classrooms, alone. It could have been a tragedy, a terror. Instead, the first day of school at this public Georgia pre-K was one of the sweetest experiences of recent memory. From the beautifully manicured entrance, blooming with vibrant floral glory, to the gym teacher at the front of the school laughing, high-fiving Coach Everett and his colorful socks featuring familiar Sesame Street characters. I could feel my son's small hand begin to loosen its iron grip as he waved at the friendly teachers, each of them stationed so as to ensure a hearty, welcoming presence every 10 feet. As parents brought their children deeper into the building and left them at the final drop-off destination. One of the first to greet us was the therapy dog, a fluffy little poodle mix who the boys were invited to cuddle as needed. By the time we arrived at the cafeteria where their teachers in class were waiting for them, they also arrived to clear directions for where to put their belongings and a simple puzzle to engage them immediately at the table. Now, by that point, we had experienced almost 10 points of contact, each of them welcoming us inside, learning our names, smiling, wearing welcoming name tags so we could know them in return. By the time they sat down at the table full of toys next to their new classmates, our children were fully disengaged from us. They were comfortable and at ease. They felt like they belonged. And it took about 7 minutes. Imagine the extent of our relief as we walked to the car, releasing our own first-day parent jitters. The weight lifted so palpably we wiped tears from our eyes. It occurred to me, this school has a philosophy of welcome more clearly defined, more expertly activated than, well, UUCA. Don't get me wrong, we do a great job here, and we are so grateful for all of the wonderful volunteers. But what if we treated each Sunday like it was the first day of school? Because for someone, it is. These days, it is vital we understand how providing a powerful ministry of welcome is directly responding not only to our theological call as Unitarian Universalists, who honor the individual search for truth, wherever you are on your journey, but also our religious call to respond to the xenophobia and the state-sponsored racism that is becoming a hallmark of our era. Think back to November 16th, 2016. It was that day that Toni Morrison, one of the greatest writers of our time, who died this past week, wrote an editorial for the New Yorker magazine. She wrote on that day, "This is a serious project. All immigrants to the United States know and knew that if they want to become real, authentic Americans, they must reduce their fealty to their native country and regard it as secondary, subordinate, in order to emphasize their whiteness. Unlike any nation in Europe, the United States holds whiteness as the unifying force. Here, for many people, the definition of Americanness is color," she wrote. "Under slave laws, The necessity for color rankings was obvious, but in America today, post-civil rights legislation, white people's conviction of their natural superiority is being lost, rapidly lost. Morrison wrote, "There are people of color everywhere, threatening to erase this long understood definition of America." And then what? Another black president? A predominantly black Senate? 3 black Supreme Court justices? The threat is frightening. That was then. November 16th, 2016, she wrote that. And here we are. That same week, after November 9th, 2016, someone very wise said to me, in response to my own lamentation, they said, Trump is not the president of your family. This administration is not the government of your family, nor your community, nor your congregation. And this is still true today. I have lived in Mexico. I've been lucky enough to live there amongst a family who welcomed me as their own, offered me their master bedroom for 5 months, which I did not realize until much later, that it was their bedroom, the parents' bedroom they were giving me. They made me dinner every single evening, and they called me daughter. Their hospitality was authentic, unwavering, and for everyone I met while I lived abroad in Guadalajara, there was no higher value than staying close with family. And this week, in America del Norte, like you, I opened the paper to discover a fresh horror amidst horrors. The news that a shooter had driven to Walmart Supercenter in El Paso, a destination for people on both sides of our border. Specifically, he went there to target Latinos. Another day in America del Norte, another horror. I opened the paper to learn over 600 people had been taken from their place of work in Mississippi, instantly orphaning hundreds of children. Apparently, this raid on a chicken processing plant had been planned for months, though no one thought to contact the Department of Family Services. I learned Mississippi is one of the only states without an immigration court. Therefore, it is unclear how these Americans, and yes, I will call them American because they contribute to our economy, they raise their families here, they send their children to our schools, and they probably even pay taxes. It is unclear how these Americans will ever be able to seek representation and ever return from their detainment. At this point in the dismantling of our democracy and the American dream, though I am an optimist by nature, I really am, I cannot with certainty say that love wins. I simply know that love is. Love is, and that is enough. It is always present. With every passing day, we are made to believe we are more powerless to resist the onslaught of injustice. But we do have agency, each one of us. We have the power to respond with love, to remember that whenever we are told to build a wall, whenever we are told to keep a gate, we can proclaim love right there instead. So my question for you, what is love calling you to do right now? There are so many barriers being erected, barriers of language. And we heard earlier how the poet Naomi Shihab Nye made a way through that barrier of her story in the airport. It's those small opportunities, if we can notice them and take them. Just the other day, I decided that whenever I wanted to cater a meeting with congregants here at UUCA, I would use it as an opportunity to support a family who has resettled here from Syria just the past couple of years. They recently started an informal catering business out of their home in Decatur called Aleppo Kitchen. This was just a small, easy decision to make, and yet there are so many barriers. I want to tell you about the barriers that we live into with these small decisions. little American assumptions that I brought to our interaction. This family, they have 4 children here, and they are trying to establish a life here in Decatur. It would be so much easier for me to just use Moe's, which has really been my habit at UUCA, the taco place. My friend built a Facebook page for this family, but there's no menu on the page. What will they serve us at our meeting? I'm really asking you that because I don't really know. Even after this interaction, I'm not exactly sure what we will eat. What is the food called? What is the price of the food? I looked for a phone number and I found it. The hours of availability. This is what it said, literally anytime. So I called. It was just 24 hours ago. I was a little last minute. And I found myself talking to Barwin, the mom, the owner, the chef, on her personal cell phone. That was the number. She answered, and when I asked what she would serve, she listed a number of things I did not understand. She gave the price. It was far too expensive, I thought, and I started to give up. Forget it. Memories of my time living in Mexico flooded to me, and I realized she was not expecting me to accept that price. I asked for a menu. She texted me pictures of the dishes. Oh, man. They looked delicious. I asked if I could use a credit card. No, I'm sorry, was her reply. This means I have to pay out of my pocket. I should give up. I asked if she could go cheaper. Still, she offered a new price. This was all happening over text message with anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes in between correspondence. The entire process was taking hours. We finally settled on a menu. Well, I think we did. We're going to have to see how this goes. It's this afternoon, how this all comes out in a couple of hours. Then I asked if she would give me a receipt, and she replied, this very end, she replies, no, I'm sorry. This was where I really had to wrestle with my choice. I called her on the phone, and somehow through our broken English, both of our broken English, we were able to communicate better than the text. Yes was what she had meant. At what point would you have given up? When communication becomes so confusing, time-consuming, when people do not respond according to your culture, your expectations, your priorities, can you get a little powdered sugar on your face? Can you rearrange your expectations? At UUCA, if you have found belonging here, are you gatekeeping the culture that comforts you and holds you? Or are you staying flexible, dynamic, open, and attentive to the angels who are coming through our doors? What do we lose when we practice radical hospitality? We may lose something. A few months ago at my ordination, Reverend Jake Morrill gave us, this congregation, a charge. Never quench your thirst, he told you. Seek comfort, yes, and once you have found it, do not settle for comfort. Stay thirsty. Find comfort and then grow, then stretch. Find comfort again, then grow and stretch. Imagine if my kids had entered their school and for the most part, the students and faculty had stuck to talking only to people they already knew. My kids, they're attending an immersion school, which means about 1/3 or more of the student body are children with severe disabilities. This is part of the rationalization for their radical welcome. This is why they have not 1, but 2 therapy dogs, why so much of the feeling of the school and the design of the building is easy. It's just easy to move around, to enter. Because if the building and the programs are designed for those who struggle the most with moving through the outside world, then everyone will find ease of access. Everyone will be welcomed with sweetness, extra care. Love is, that I know. We must never quench our thirst. There is more we can do now to respond to the moral degradation of our society, more we can do right now to respond with love. I have spent much of this summer praying and researching the best way to respond with love to this inhumane treatment of immigrants and asylum seekers. Now, there are many Unitarian Universalist ministers who say they preach and it is up to the congregation to decide what they may or may not do to take action. I'm just not one of those ministers. So I would like for us to consider two paths as our response. As a faith community, we have resources, we have power, time, talent, money, agency. Let us use them wisely and carefully. So I would like to suggest we gather once per week for a letter writing party. Okay, you could do it at home, but it would be more fun to do it together. We can meet during the day or we can meet in the evening, sharing food, playing music. Let's write letters to our congresspeople every single week, our senators, to others in the government. Let them know we oppose the family separation policy and its heartless enforcement. Let them know we demand children be released from detention. Meanwhile, we can partner with an organization to write letters to people detained in Stewart Detention Center in Georgia. And we can write letters to children in detention right now, letting them know we are thinking of them. Our prayers and our love are with them. Make them feel a little less alone. It does make a difference. I have heard this firsthand. And once per month, a small group of us will go to Stewart Detention Center to deliver the letters and anything else we can. It's only a couple of hours away from us, and it is one of the worst detention centers in the country in terms of the facility and the treatment of detainees. We must bear witness to this atrocity that is happening in our name. Who knows? Who knows? We don't know what will come of this action. We cannot know yet. And I also think that if this administration wants to separate families, then it is our religious and moral call to reunite families, which brings me to the next strand of our two-pronged response. I call on us to become intimately involved with reuniting families. We can find partners. There are people who are doing it, and we can sponsor a family's reunification. This may require we just take one family at a time. This may require bailing someone out of detention or finding housing for someone. But if we can sponsor just one family reuniting, we will have done something to add to the forces of love in this time of hate and injustice. Now, this may not be your calling, and that's okay too. It is enough to practice your ministry of radical hospitality right here at UUCA. You see, there's work to do here in the community. There's work to do out there. It is all necessary. Together, we can learn to practice radical welcome to newcomers in our midst, to people in our congregation who don't know the ropes around here. The benefit of our wilderness experience, as I like to call our time in the treehouse, where the ark is, there's the ark, I guess, is that we are all learners now. We are all learners. We have held each other resiliently during this transition to the treehouse and to a new ministry. Unitarian Universalism tends to have a big theological tent, yet its culture, the way it feels, can sometimes be very small and insular. We are poised in Atlanta to do something different. Let someone new, yes, let someone new into your heart. For the way they challenge you may be a true gift to your life. Whether this radical hospitality comes naturally to you or whether it is a learning curve, either way, we can do this together. Now, perhaps you are sitting here wondering if you are the stranger. Well, guess what? You belong here. No one belongs here more than anyone else. We all belong, whether we come up and speak in worship or we never do, whether we sit in the back or the front, whether we feel out of place or whether we feel right at home here. We all belong. Jesus, in his time, traversed political borders as a nomad. not only to spread his message of revolutionary love, not only to escape persecution, but also, I believe, is a lifelong commitment to the idea that borders are not real. Not the political borders, not the social borders we construct. Let's all get a little bit of powdered sugar on our faces. I almost brought it, but it would have been tough to preach with powdered sugar on your face. A little bit of powdered sugar on our faces, like those strangers in the airport, like the sparkling sweetness of true connection, true community. In her commencement speech to Bard College in 1979, Toni Morrison wrote that the function of freedom is to free somebody else. Freedom is not finite. Power is not finite either. And if we can use our power to welcome people, to imagine them as angels among us, then we can use our collective power to reunite a family, to proclaim love and freedom in a world that desperately needs us to act now. May it be so.